How do you conduct this? So that's basically what we are going to do in this course. And because it is a one semester course, we are going to combine qualitative and quantitative research techniques. When we talk about research, you can have qualitative research, quantitative research, or you put the two together, and then you have what? Mixed method research. Usually, we separate them. Qualitative research as a force on this. Then quantitative research as a force on this. But for the purposes of the MBA, we have it as one course, research methods, which means I will do qualitative and then what? Qualitative, quantitative, and qualitative research techniques. In terms of what we expect, starting with today, we are going to study introduction to. So this is the introductory lecture. The first outline is nature and philosophy of management research, which is our introductory lecture. Nature and philosophy of what? Management research. And here, I'm going to take you through the definition of research. We are going to go through what is research. What does it mean when we say that somebody is what? Conduct research. What does it mean? Then I will talk to you about the nature of management research. When we talk about management research, all research that is done by those in the business disciplines, we call it management research. So whether you are doing accounting, finance, procurement, human resource, you name it, we call it what? Management research. So what are the characteristics of management research which distinguish management research from, say, research conducted in the sciences and even other social sciences? So we'll talk about that today. Then when we finish discussing the nature of business research, we now move to philosophy. Now, at this level, your research must be based on a philosophy. When we talk about philosophy, we are simply talking about your worldview. What perspective from the theoretical level are you approaching the research? So we'll discuss that. There are a number of philosophical angles, and we'll take time to discuss that today. Of course, because it is a 1 hour lecture for today, we will not reach the level of the philosophy. We need a full 2 hour lecture. So today, much of what we'll do will be on the nature of business research, which will start soon. Then the next lecture we'll try to understand what the research process entails. What are the steps that you should follow if you want to conduct research? That's what we talk about, the research work process. We will combine that with research ethics. If you are conducting research, there are some do's and don'ts which you must follow to make the research ethical. We'll do that as well. Then the next topic, which is the third topic, we'll look at research problem definition and literature review. Every research must solve a problem. So, question, how do you craft or design a research problem? And having designed and crafted a research problem, how do you review literature? When we talk about literature review, there are at least 3 levels. Conceptual literature review, theoretical literature review, and then we have empirical literature review. We'll talk about all that. Then, when that is done, we'll look at how do you conceptualize your research? How do you define your variables and the relationship that exists among the variables to your research? That is at the heart of research conceptualization. And we are combining research conceptualization with what we call research design. And with research design, we will take you through the various types of research design, whether you are going to use an exploratory design, or you are going to use a descriptive design, or you are going to use the causal or causal comparative design. We are going to take you through all that. Then, when we are through with that, we can then move to our next topic, which will relate to sampling. Because the subjects that we want to interview are many, we cannot interview everybody. Sometimes due to time, other times it's due to what resources. So how do you ensure that the few that you are going to select for the research, whatever views that you get from them, it will reflect the views of what the entire population? That is what we mean by sampling. So in sampling, we'll look at sampling techniques that you use for qualitative research, and then sampling techniques you use for what? Quantitative research. We will not have a formal mid-trimester examination, but there will be a term paper which will write in place of that. Then we'll look at sources of data. We'll look at primary sources of data, where you, the researcher, you will go and collect the data. Then we'll look at secondary sources of data, where the researcher goes for what? Data that has already been collected by somebody or some institution for some purposes. Which data you find useful for your research work? So we'll treat that as well. Then we'll look at data analysis. We'll teach you the fundamentals of qualitative data analysis and quantitative data analysis. And then lastly, we'll look at research report. When you have finished with your research, so you've collected the data, you've done the analysis, how do you write the report? What should be the structure of the report? So that is at the heart of what? your research report right. Now, so that is the outline that we'll be going through. In terms of the recommended reading materials for this course, the main text that we use for this research methods class is by Hare, Page, and Bransfeld, the 2020 edition, titled Essentials of Business Research Methods. So that is the key text that is a very good book. So some of the topics I combined Saunders and then what? And then Hare and that. So as you see the interface of this, you will know which particular lecture is coming from, which can guide you in terms of your reading. Apart from that, there are other books that you can also read on research methods to help your understanding of the topic. So that is the course outline. If you have any question on the outline, feel free to ask me. All right, so let's start our first topic. So the first topic we are going to discuss under research methods, as I indicated, is nature and philosophy of management research. Nature and philosophy of management research. So the lecture is in two parts. The first part is what we are going to try to finish today, and then next week we shall conclude on the second part. The first part is going to look at the nature of business and management research. So it's going to be looking at understanding what business research what applied research and basic research. So when we talk about research, we usually have the methods, then we have what? The methodology. Sometimes we use methods and methodology interchangeably. So sometimes somebody intends to say methodology, but they will say what? Method. Other times they want to say methodology and then or the other way around. So these we are quite flexible with their use. Research methods, research methodology. When we talk about research methods, we are basically concerned with the techniques and procedures used to obtain data. what are the techniques and the procedures you follow in order to what? Collect your data. You mean by research methods. So somebody says, let your research methods very clear. Then they intend to tell you that clearly indicate how you are going to collect your data in such a way that minimize bias. Take note of that. When you are going to collect data, one of the things that you need to safeguard is to ensure that the integrity of the data is intact, especially if you are going to do interviews, and even if you are going to collect secondary data, you still need to ensure that your data is in good shape. So research methods will provide the techniques that you will require in order to ensure that your data is obtained, that it is in good order, that you can use for what? Your analysis. Then research methodology. What is research? The theory around research is what we mean by research. So the theory regarding how research should be conducted is referred to as what? Research methodology. And we will go through a number of theories that indicate to us how best we can conduct research. Because if we do not know the rules that we need to apply in conducting research, then we will methodology provides you with the theoretical opinion, which would enable you to conduct research competently. So then, we ask ourselves, what is research? Who knows what research is? I want somebody to put down. What is research? What is research? I want somebody. And some of you, yes. Yes, thank you. Yes, so it says that research is what? Collecting and what? Analyzing data. So it's part of research. Though that's not all about what? You have done well. Who also has a different or something to add? You are afraid of them, but so he's saying that it's a system of data to what? Find solutions. Okay. So these are all components of what? Research. Somebody said that research is search engine. So you have to read before what? Search. So if it is research, it means like that just telling you that search engine. So even though you have an idea as to what ought to be, still search again to be sure that what ought to be actually exists. And that is simply what research is all about. But to be more comprehensive, we can talk about research as being a process whereby you do a systematic investigation. In other words, in doing research, as a researcher, you take your time. You don't do research in a hurry. I am in a hurry to go. No, you will miss the point. is systematic. So it means that you have to plan as to how the research has to be conducted. It is not something that should happen by chance. It is something that has to be what? Deliberately what? Planned for. You have to deliberately plan for it. So you investigate. Take your time and investigate. Investigation means that there is a hidden truth which cannot be seen on the surface unless you peel a number of layers. Then you get to the bottom of it. That's why when they suspect that somebody has stolen, they investigate. So the community will investigate how exactly did the person steal the money and how much. So there's an investigation in a systematic manner. Now, and there's a purpose. The purpose, one of the purposes is to discover new knowledge. If your research is not discovering new knowledge, then it is merely replicating what is already known. So we call that replication research. Somebody has done it in Accra. We also want to do it in Tamale. So you are trying to see whether what was found in Accra can apply to what is in what in Tamale. You are not necessarily generating what something new. So that's replication research. But research, one of the purposes is to discover something new or to expand existing knowledge. We already know about something, but some areas of that idea still need some light to be thrown upon them. So you pick it up from where somebody left and move it to what? The next level. So you are expanding knowledge. It can also just be that there's a problem at the workplace. You are seeing that a particular product, the demand for it is coming down. You want to conduct research to find out why is it that people are no longer patronizing this particular product. And so do that research to what? Solve the practical problem. You can also use the research to develop a new product. Apple and the rest. All the new products that will come out with this new research. Develop new apps, develop new services. So this is a more comprehensive definition of research. Now, when I'm at the front with you, I'm not going to ask you what is research. So I'll ask you a question like that. That's too basic. Okay. But it's good for you to understand what it says before you now apply it to other issues. So from the definition, you can see that the definition presents some critical characteristics of research. First is data collection. So the data collection is systematic. Then data analysis is also done well, systematically. Then data interpretation, systematically. And then also there is a direction. The research work has a one. Okay. So you can then say that in research, you systematically define your problem, which is your topic, systematically collect data, analyze the data systematically, interpret the data systematically, present the results systematically. and then you are done. So that's what research is. So a systematic process of what? Defining your problem, collecting your data, analyzing the data, interpreting the data or results, and then presenting what the results. The issue is that you have to be good at all these. In other words, you have to be good at determining what is researchable. Not all topics are research topics. Okay. So you may come to your supervisor, and then you are so convinced about the topic, then your supervisor will tell you that this is not a topic. Let's shape it this way. Then it becomes what? Researchable. Okay. So you must be good at what? Defining the research problem. Good at what? Knowing how to collect the data well. Good at knowing how to analyze the data. Good at knowing how to what? Interpret the data. Knowing how to what? Good at how to what? Present the results. Then we can say that you are what? A good researcher. And that is the journey that we are embarking on through this course. Now, what are the characteristics of business and management research? What are the characteristics? The first characteristic of business and management research, which you must know, is that business research is transdisciplinary. Transdisciplinary. That it comes across what? Disciplinary backgrounds, or it extends beyond several what? Disciplinary boundaries. Now, when you are into business, you may be required to solve problems that relate to chemistry. Because as a manager of a pharmaceutical company, there are aspects of it that are not business. But if you don't understand them, they will steal all the products and you will not know anything about what has been stolen. Or they will bring fake things and you will think that you are selling property. So you must have some fair idea. So business research may require that you apply knowledge in what? Sociology. It may require that you apply knowledge in what? Psychology. It may require that you apply knowledge in some other discipline in order that you can have the research to be completed. So one of the features of business research is what? Transdisciplinary, or something multidisciplinary. Transdisciplinary. The second characteristic of business research is that it is focused more on practice and not so much on theory. Business research often requires that you focus on what? Practice and not so much on theory. But that doesn't mean that theory doesn't have it. Theory has what? A critical role. We usually say that theory is the fuel for research. Okay. So theory is very important. But business research, one of the unique qualities is that we want to solve a problem that is in the business world. So business research should seek to solve that. So related to the second is the third, which we say that business research completes what? The better cycle of research. In the sense that we move from theory to what? Practice. We don't stay at the level of theory alone. Because if you stay at the level of theory alone, they'll ask you, and so what? What can we take out of it as businesses? What is in there for us? Okay, so the vector cycle is then complete. So you have theory linking to what? Practice. And then the practice will also lead back to what? The theory. And then the link of the loop continues. That's why we say it's a vector as the same. Vector cycle. Also related to the third is the fact that business research has to respond to what they need to address specific problems that businesses face today. So it is key that whatever business research is being conducted, it provides a solution to an organization, a solution to a firm, or a solution to what? An industry. And that completes some of the aspects of business research. Now, when it comes to still under the nature of business research, there are some debates that you must understand. And these debates center around knowledge production. As students of business research, you are required to produce research output. The question is, should the research output you produce, since you are in an academic institution, be solely theory-based? Or it should be solely what? Practice-based? Or it should be what? A combination of what? Theory and practice. While some are of the view that business research should be conducted such that we produce theories, others are of the view that it should be conducted for the purposes of what? Informing what? Practice. While something that we should combine the two. Now, so then the debate is centered around three possible modes of knowledge production. Three possible modes of knowledge production. In other words, how should business knowledge be? So we have mode 1, mode 2, and mode 3. And we are going to discuss them. So we have mode 1, knowledge production or knowledge creation, whereby the emphasis is on theory. The emphasis is on producing what? Theory. So the knowledge produced under mode 1 is mainly to satisfy academic and intellectual curiosity. Yeah. So, for instance, I teach at the university. If I'm going to do research, as an academic, my aim is to advance my what? Academic discipline. So if my aim is to advance my academic discipline, it means that I have to advance what? Theory. There are theories that underlie the discipline that I work in. So my focus is on what? Producing knowledge that will advance theory. So most research work that is done by academics is usually under mode 1 knowledge production. So research done usually in universities, in research in academic institutions are under mode 1 knowledge production, where the purpose is to conduct research for what? Solving academic problems or to satisfy intellectual curiosity. But it doesn't mean that we don't do research that also solve practical problems. We do. Okay. We do research that also satisfies practical problems. But for most academics, when I'm going to conduct research, not sponsored by somebody. For if a business is sponsoring the research, it means that they want me to do the research to help them solve their problem. But if I am going to remove money from my conduct research, I'm not going to do research to solve problem for a particular business. So that's how it goes. Then we have mode 2 knowledge production. Here, we are trying to ensure that the research solves real world problems, such that it is conducted through a collaboration between academia and industry, such that emphasis is on solving a problem that businesses encounter so that they can advance their production processes to ensure that they will increase their profits. So it's more profit oriented rather than theory centered. Okay. So the mode 2 would increase production and ensure that the knowledge produced is relevant to what industry players. Then yet again, some are of the view that if we were to stop at mode 2, we will have some particular types of research work that will get conducted. Why? Because there are some research problems that when they are solved, it will not necessarily cause businesses to earn profit. But at the end of the day, it may enhance the welfare of the entire society. So, for instance, when it came to COVID-19, it was very expensive to discover vaccines. First, to research the vaccines, and then to produce the vaccines. We produce the vaccines. We are not sure whether by the time you finish producing the vaccine, the disease will still be there. If by the time you finish producing the vaccine and the disease vanishes, what happens to the vaccines? You have lost. So you may produce the vaccine, but the aim of producing the vaccine is not to make profit, but to support the survival of the general society. So as of now, there will be a lot of vaccines that are locked up in several places. COVID is not there. You can't use the vaccine, but you have spent money. We can't say it's money wasted because nobody knew when COVID was going to leave us. So that's the mode 3 mode of production, where research is not only focused on what? Producing output that is practically relevant for businesses to make profit, but it takes into consideration the welfare of what? Society. Even when society's welfare has to be taken and no profit is made out of it, that research ought to still be conducted. That's what we are talking about. So the mode 3 is not necessarily profit oriented. If profit comes, fine. But if the research is needed to ensure the continual existence of mankind and to ensure peace and good neighborliness in society for health, then such research can be conducted. And of course, we see that in the mode 3 research, those who require sponsorship, somebody must be willing to fund it, and usually the state funds most of the research. You have research institutions that conduct research, like go to SARI, CSIR, and all that. Sometimes they themselves are not seeking to make profit. They produce the varieties, new varieties, to come out with new innovations and all that for the good of our society. If profit comes through, if it doesn't come, that's also good as well. We also have the debate around the relevance of research. And that relevance of research is categorized in two. The first one is what we call the relevance gap. What causes the relevance gap is that academics are sitting in their ivory tower. Then they are conducting their research. Businesses are also sitting at their workplaces, working daily and encountering problems. The two of them do not interact consistently. So the research output that is generated by academia is now not relevant to solving the problems that businesses encounter daily. So in that case, there is a gap that comes out, and that gap is what we call what? The relevance gap. What academia produces is not what? Relevant to what? The needs of what? Businesses. So in that case, relevance gap is what? And it is created due to the separation of what? Knowledge producers from what? Knowledge consumers. Academia, they are what? Knowledge what? Producers. Industry, they are knowledge users. So if the one producing it doesn't know what the one who is going to consume it needs, then you see that there will be a gap. That's why when you go to the library there are hundreds and thousands of theses, and your own will now come and add. And I'll tell you that the only time a thesis is going to be open in the library will be when somebody wants to also learn how to make one. And not when a business is looking for solutions. Because of what? The relevance, the gap in relevance. Yes. Then there's a debate that we call evidence-based management. Here, we see that management, and here we're talking about business managers or business leaders, have the tendency to take decisions without grounding those decisions on what? Research. So they rely on their experience. Say, I'm an experienced manager. I've been encountering this situation several times, so I know how to deal with it. So they use experience, they use their what? Intuition to make decisions rather than using research as the basis for informing their decisions. So we call that evidence-based management gap. We are now then saying that management, therefore, must make decisions based on what? Evidence. When you discover a problem in your organization, don't just say that, oh, this is what I learned in school, or this is what my intuition is telling me, but conduct research to find out what the actual problem is, diagnose the problem, and then what? You can then solve the problem. Okay. So that relates to the evidence-based management. So the argument is that management decisions should be based on what? Research, rather than gut feeling or what? Mere use of experience. Now, to talk about the relevance gap and the issues arising there. We can categorize research into 4 categories based on the relevance gap that I just mentioned. And this categorization is based on how theoretically and methodologically sound the research is. Now, when we talk about theoretical and methodological review, we're saying that the research has a theory that is informing it. And then also, the researcher takes due care to ensure that error is minimized to what the best is not the best. That's what rigor, your research is rigorous. So when you conduct research and somebody says that your research lacks rigor, it means that they are telling you that, number one, your theory is either non-existent or weak. Number two, or that your methodology is not strong. Okay. So a research that has theoretical and methodological is said to be a research that is well grounded in theory and informed by what? Good methodology. Then we can talk about them under practical relevance. After satisfying theoretical reason, does it have any takeaway for businesses? Does it have information that businesses can also choose and implement that information so that they can improve upon their processes? So we can classify research based on relevance into pedantic science, popular science, pure science, or pragmatic science. And I will tell you what each of them will mean based on the degree of what? Rigor, and then what? The relevance. So let's look at the first one, which is the pedantic science. We say that a research is pedantic science if it is, number one, theoretically and methodologically strong. So you see that this is higher. So it means that the methodology and the theory is very high relative to what? The practical relevance. So methodology and theory is higher than what? Practical relevance. So we say that this research is lower in what? Practical relevance, but what? Higher in what? Theory and methodology. Such a research which is higher in theory and methodology, but lower in practical relevance is called pedantic science. Pedantic science. High in what? Theory and methodological strength, but weak when it comes to what? Practical relevance. It is called pedantic science. Where do you think science research is likely to be conducted? Where? Academia. Yes. So such research is likely to be conducted within the academia. So in the academia, my aim is to publish and get promoted. So I would not care so much about practical relevance. So long as I can make my colleagues or my peers to agree that I'm generating knowledge significant in our system, I'm okay. If in the way something comes out and businesses can use it, that's fine. But that's not my main aim. Then the second category of research based on relevance gap is what we call the popular science. Popular science. This one, when it comes to theoretical and methodological rigor, it is lower. compared to practical relevance. So theoretical and methodological rigor is lower than what? Practical relevance. So which means that practical relevance is higher than what? Methodological and theoretical rigor. So that research is what for popular science. Popular science. Where do you think such a research will be conducted? Yes, so this is highly likely to be conducted for or by what? Business. Because they want to what? Practical relevance, we can help them to what? Produce more, and for that matter. So if you look at most operational manuals, I may not be able to make an air condition, but when I pick the manual, it can show me how I can use it. So practical relevance. They will not be telling me about the science, how you join wires together to make air condition. No. They will tell you that switch this thing, switch that, and then when you do that, you have your air condition working. So that comes under popularized science. The third category is pure science. This one is low on most courses. It is lower in theory and method. It is also lower in what? Practical relevance. Where do you think we can get this from? Where do you think we can get this one? It's low in practical relevance, low in what? Theory and method. You get them usually in media. Mostly they are interested in sensations. This person's wife has run away here. This person gossip. So usually they don't. Sometimes they may use strong methodology. I'm not saying all the time. In the media work, it's pure science, no. But we are saying that more likely we may find it there. It doesn't mean that everything that you do is going to be based on those sensational, discussions and all. Then the last category, which is pragmatic science, is research that is higher both in what? Theoretical and methodological, as well as what? Practical elements. In other words, the research is underpinned by strong science. It is also highly what? Relevant. Where do you think we can find this? We can find it in what? Health research. Yes, for health research, you can find them. Where again? It can also be a collaboration between what? Industry and what? Academia. Okay. You can also find that in national research institutions. Research institutions do what? Scientific research, but they also produce relevant research. And also, national research is, for instance, NASA. If you must take somebody to move, you can imagine that you want to take somebody to move. You must understand the science first. If you don't understand the atmosphere in the moon, and you start going to the moon, you cannot reach them. So that research has to be underpinned by science. So you finish with the science and then practically now leave the person to the moon and bring them back. So those research works are theoretically grounded, because if the theory is missing, there will be a disaster. Even in military operations, most of them are guided by research, intelligence work. Has to be grounded in science and theory. And so it's high in theory, it is high in practical readiness. So we call that one pragmatic science. So if I just simply say, based on relevance, discuss 4 categories of research. It's easy. Giving examples. So that's how the exam is going to be. Yes. So let me just conclude on this. So concluding part, just to talk about applied and basic research. We can also categorize research into 2. Applied and what? Basic research. Now, when we talk about applied research, the motivation is to solve a particular problem that is faced by an organization. In other words, applied research is specific in terms of addressing the needs of an organization. Whereas basic research tries to understand a business-related phenomenon that may apply to an entire industry or an entire business process. In other words, applied research is more specific. Basic research is what? General. Which means that applied research in discussing our practical our relevance gap will be high in what? In practice. And it will be lower in what? Theory. Okay? We take applied research. Because we want to understand, investigate, for instance, what is happening in a particular firm like GC or any other firm. We use applied research. But if you are now trying to discuss what happens in the entire banking system, you are now at the level of what? Basic research. Because you need a theory that can apply to all what? The banking system or the service industry. Okay. So that is more basic. So generally, for instance, I just want to give examples for you to understand what we mean by that. So if your research question was Coca-Cola asked, why is Pepsi gaining market share in Paris? You see here, the focus is on what? Coca-Cola. To investigate, to find out why Pepsi is eating into the market share of what Coca-Cola in what Paris. And that is an applied research. But if you want to make it a basic research, you have to broaden it. So here, why are people drinking more bottled water and less water? This is at the level of theory. What is the reason why people are not drinking more bottled and less water? You go into that. And that means that you are moving beyond Coca-Cola or Pepsi to look at the service in that group in general. Or another example is, can prospective employees psychological profiles be recruited over Armagunas? Here you are asking whether, if you know the psychological state of the employee, you can use it to determine who is going to resign and move to another job, and who is going to stay. And McDonald's. You see, that is specific. McDonald's. Now, the same issue can be determined from applied research and moving to basic research. If you recap and say, what psychological factors predict reduced turnover in service patients? The topics are the same, but the focus is different. This one is what very specific. This one is about the industry, the product industry. So you would when I send the slides after the lecture, I'll send it on the platform. You read more, so read this particular thing. Because if I ask you to distinguish between applied and basic research, this is what you are going to use to discuss. Discuss what so to test yourself whether you were here or not, when you go, try your hands on this section. Outline and discuss all distinctive features of business. We talked about them. Evaluate what is based around the conduct of what business and management. Remember, we talked about 1, 2, 3, and we talked about what relevance gap, and then what evidence-based management. These are the debates I'm talking about. Distinguish between basic and applied research. Back your discussion with suitable example. So, because of time, I will end the research methods lecture here so that you can continue. You can take a break. I think the next lecture is supposed to be at the 1, right? 1:30. Yes, 1:30. 1:30. So we'll have a break, and then after the break, the next lecture can continue. Thank you very much for the patience. No. These are just practice questions to guide you in your studies. Once you are studying, check yourself whether you can answer them. If you can answer them, it means that you are almost getting prepared for the exam. Because these as well are sample exam questions. At the end of each lecture, these questions are there, so you test yourself. All right, thank you very much. So it says that the slides have been shared on the Google Classroom. But I'll also share this one on the WhatsApp tab. So wherever you go, you will find it. You have to advance your ideas.
The professor my phone there. Is the phone for the professor? Professor.
The first code to join is on the WhatsApp group. Yes. Yes. Come, let me stop the record.
It's a fake.
Yes.